Record. And the recording is basically for our website. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We're back after a break of a month, and it's nice to see you all. Today's session is going to be on the future of work, and we're going to hear from people doing very different things in different countries, and also people who have experience working in many different countries. So keep that in mind as you choose to ask your questions. One thing I should mention is with regards to the format for the session. So I know that a webinar format is probably kind of a safer format to go with for these types of things, but we started out doing it in this way, and I think it's a little bit nicer when you can actually see who else is in the room. And so that's been our main motivation to just continue in this way. However, we did also have one case of Zoom bombing, which we totally want to avoid. And so what we've been doing is just making sure that at least until all the talks are done, we don't have any disturbances. And so for that, we've made all of the presenters co-hosts, and then everyone else is muted. If you want to say something at any point, like if you do have an urge, just put it in the chat. And we'll also have an active chat going. So as there are questions that come up with the talks, definitely put them in the chat so that we can come back to those questions. Each of the talks is going to be less than or equal to 15 minutes long, hopefully. If anyone goes over, we might start to maybe give you gentle warnings. This is certainly, it's meant to be informal, so we're not expecting that you would have practiced everything to the minute. So chill, have fun with the talks, have fun with the conversations, bang the plates, yes. But yeah, if everything goes as per plan, then we will be done with the talks in about 60 minutes. And then we can have a Q&A. And for the Q&A, we'll just cycle through and we'll hear from everybody. And you're all working in very different domains. So it will be nice to hear different perspectives. So that said, I think we can go ahead and get started. Nick, would you like to share your screen? And in this time, let me kind of quickly introduce Nick. So I was asking her also just a few minutes ago how I should introduce her, because there's so much to be said. I mean, I've been reading Nick's work for many, many years, and she's honestly one of the most kind of deeply thoughtful researchers that I've met in my time doing ICTD research. And as I was asking her right now how many countries she's worked in, and it's many, and in many different continents. And she started working with Aboriginal populations in Australia. Since then, she's worked in many different countries, including India and I think it was Indonesia, and I'm gonna maybe misremember, so I won't list all of them. But for the last 12 years, she's been in Africa, so starting with South Africa and then in Namibia, and broadly works in this space of HCI and social informatics, and has been an expert in kind of various forms of critical thought in the field. So that said, I'm going to ask Nick to start talking. So go ahead, Nick.
All right, so my dog has just wanted to start talking. So if I go mute, it's because he's really shouting, okay? And bear with me, he's in another room. Sorry about that. Also, I'm running the video, but we were having problems earlier. So Niha, I can see you out of the corner of my eye. Wave at me if the video is, and I'll turn it off, okay? So thanks everybody for coming, wherever you're coming from. I hope you're all well and your loved ones are well and supported. And I wish that being in time together today brings some hope, despite the dark side of the topics we might be discussing. I'm going to begin with some characterizations of time in HCI and social informatics to ground the literature and studies that I'm going to cover. So each of us experiences time in many ways simultaneously, and we assign diverse meanings to these experiences. Time is quantitative, objective, subjective, situated, socially constructed. It's also represented in many different ways. And everyday life comprises many temporal orders and registers or rhythms. An example of the pluritemporality, gosh, I can't say it, is Wendy Norris and colleagues' work on collaboration between digital humanitarians who respond to disasters. And they devote a lot of effort to managing many temporal orders in incoming streams of information, metadata structures, and systems that encode and display time in different ways as they manage these disasters. And they're distributed across many countries, so they also have to reconcile diverse personal and cultural experiences of time. You'll notice I put the references on the slides. If you're watching us on a tape, you can pause. So our temporalities are also highly interwoven and interdependent. Societies have temporal orders that shape the ways those rhythms interconnect. For instance, school hours, not business hours, in some US states were changed in response to how long it took parents to commute to work. Some cultural practices explicitly express the inherent inseparability of time and human relationship, and there's various work in ICD that observes how design abstractions that prioritize schedules and punctuality disrupt local temporal orders and registers in some societies. Nihar, is the video still okay?
Yeah, it's great.
Okay, cool. So, for instance, we explored some tensions between constructs of time embedded in research and design and local relations in our work in Eastern Cape and South Africa. So the paper I've mentioned here illustrates how community engagements and interface design address the relational character of temporality and local temporal order. The further we are from the routines of other people's lives, the less aware we are of how our rhythms interconnect. For instance, those working on early morning or late night shifts support those who work 9 to 5, but we may only become aware of this when we interact with a shift worker. In fact, participation in the same temporal orders is distributed unevenly according to society's power relations. Some rhythms are prioritized in divisions of labor, as Sarah Sharma's book explains about temporality has cultural politics. In the 21st century, these politics shape and are shaped by a discourse of speed. Sean Lindley and others describe how technologies and modern cultures of instantaneity, oh, I've got my tongue twisted today, haven't I, have co-evolved. We emphasize speed in innovation and digital devices, and this emphasis links to other values that affect temporal orders. Lindley, for instance, describes a condition of immediacy. We access asynchronous information at times convenient to us, and we treat it as if it's in the same temporal register as ourselves. Contrast, for instance, how we might wait for the evening news on TV with the apparent constant flow of a news stream online. So technology use, social conventions, and temporal design entwine together to create expectations of immediacy in on-demand services. But what about when these expectations affect other people directly, when it's people's bodies that ensure supply is available on demand? Algorithms designed to match supply and demand in service platforms don't account for the extra work some people must do to coordinate with others, Automated on-demand services contributed to normalizing temporal orders that marginalize just-in-time workers. They've shifted our cultural expectations to satisfy customers' demands at the expense of workers' hectic tempo. For instance, in pre-pandemic New York, complaints to non-Uber taxis vastly increased with adoption of Uber. Meanwhile, Uber drivers feel lonely, isolated, and dehumanized. So while free to decide when and for how long they would like to work, Uber also admits to using insights from behavioral science in algorithmic management to nudge drivers to work longer hours. In response to their marginalization, platform workers such as ride-hail drivers, couriers, and delivery workers can behave subversively. For instance, a study in the Harvard Review quite recently describes how drivers play the system by alternating between different ride platforms every week. Workers also use mundane workarounds and opportunistic tactics in their struggle to align the time that it actually takes to do the work with the temporality of the platform. A study of 3 of China's food delivery platforms describes how to meet the delivery times imposed, workers ride hell for leather every minute, run red lights and run up 30 flights of stairs. They also borrow one another's time. For example, a delivery rider will hand over their jobs to another rider who is already in an elevator for deliveries to a high rise. These exchange practices are motivated both by an economic need to avoid late fines and also by understanding of a collective lack of time and a morality of mutual reciprocity. You do it for me now, I'll return the favour later. The food delivery platforms estimate times based on linear distance. They don't account for changing directions, making turns, waiting at lights when riding a bike in a city. They don't account for waiting for an elevator or a restaurant's delay in preparing a meal. Mismatches between platform and real-life temporality were also revealed in a study we did with Jackie O'Neill at Microsoft Research about Ola that connects passengers to Ola, to auto rickshaws in India. Ola could potentially improve the lives of drivers who work long hours, circling the shit streets, looking for enough passengers to cover their basic living costs. When available, most drivers tried to accept the ride request sent via Ola, but often ignored requests in peak hours and poor traffic conditions. The requests that they saw only showed the area, which varied from 1 kilometre to 5 kilometres across. Since travelling to a customer takes fuel and time, drivers accounted for various factors that they did know about in accepting a request: their own location, traffic conditions, and the time of day. The Ola interface at that time did not give drivers enough information to make good decisions. It did not show the driver how far they are from the pickup location. And passengers pay the drivers a convenience charge over the meter fare to compensate for the fuel and for any phone calls they need to coordinate. However, the estimation of arrival time is often inaccurate, so customers who book might jump into any passing auto without cancelling their Ola rickshaw. The platform interacts with existing inequalities that shape temporal order. The system's unequal transparency for drivers and customers does not support a mutual understanding of travel time. Unlike the Chinese food delivery workers who share a collective lack of time and behave with reciprocity, the app does not help to build a transient awareness that enables drivers to coordinate, or riders and drivers to coordinate. This lack of transparency for drivers contrasts with Windhoek's self-organising shared taxi system, which enables drivers to keep all the seats in their taxis full and riders to hail an affordable ride to their destination from the roadside. About 10% of Namibia's population owns a car, and there are a few local buses. So this system is very important to moving around Windhoek. And my students try to design different mobile apps to support transport. One, Joseph Casera, studied the existing shared taxi system where passengers pay the same amount for trips up to 5 kilometres, and drivers constantly pick up riders at the roadside and drop them off wherever they want to go. After they start their day, they find the first 1 or 2 passengers in a shift. Drivers will circle a few minutes to fill the remaining seats and then drive to the passenger's destination. As they drop off and pick up new people, the drivers rarely spend any time negotiating. They rapidly decide to accept a passenger or say no before moving on. Passengers use their local knowledge about where to stand on the roadside to get a taxi heading in their intended direction. And drivers have learnt about passengers' volumes and flow over the day. The system works very efficiently based on this shared knowledge. That's my dog, it's not my stomach. Oops. The tempo is usually fast when these distances are short, and it's difficult to improve upon it by technology. Drivers may not maintain an uninterrupted tempo, delivering and replenishing passengers. There's a lot of collaboration going on between passengers and drivers that keeps up that tempo. For instance, they collaborate around payment. Passengers usually pay during the ride before they disembark. And drivers take only cash with a flat non-metered fare. So payments proceed quite quickly. Sometimes a customer will poke the driver from the back and hand over the fare. And sometimes the customer in the front seat mediates so that the driver focuses only on the road. So there's a rhythm that passengers join in from the roadside until they hop off. When distances are longer, the tempo changes. Namibia has a very low population density of 2.5 million and very long drives between towns, at least 200 kilometres, often 1,000 k. And minibus taxis leave certain locations for these trips. Often a customer can sit in the minibus and wait until it fills up before it leaves, and that can be hours or even the next day. So the temporal differentiation between drivers and passengers isn't well reconciled. There isn't this tempo like in the short trips. Reconciling temporalities between drivers and riders is not just about optimizing time use according to the efficiency impulse of computation. It's about a consciousness that a collective scarcity of time is not good for our humanity. Resentment amongst platform workers like Uber drivers may ultimately damage a platform company's profits. But more profoundly, we need to consider how the values we embed in algorithms impose a certain sort of right time that affects our connections with each other. We've tackled this in an upcoming Kai paper this year, which draws upon the concept of right time described by Aboriginal authors in HCI. Rather than an algorithm that aggregates data on people's interactions to promote experiences of personal convenience, our blockchain-based app platform promotes an awareness of moral as well as personal and social cues in temporalities. The platform in the Kai paper was for fintech, not ride sharing. But what I hope I've done today is to inspire considering what values should shape the temporalities that we embed in our on-demand service platforms. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nick. I think we can do whatever reactions for applauses, right? I can't, yeah, I'm gonna try that now. All right. Thanks so much. And that was a really nice kind of, I loved seeing all of the citations that you had on all of the slides. So we'll go on to the next talk, but we might have questions at the end when everyone is done. So let's stop sharing. And then Julie, would you like to share your screen?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, so just a brief intro. So, Julie is an assistant professor at the University of Michigan, the School of Information, and one of the things that I think or that I find really compelling in her work is that she ties together kind of ideas around micro entrepreneurship. That's some of the work that I've read that I found really interesting, because often we don't look at livelihoods and economic livelihoods as we're doing ICTD work. We kind of look at things like networking or health workers sort of workflows and such. But the economics of it is so key to questions around development. And it's been really interesting to read that, and I'm excited to hear what you'll talk about today. So go ahead.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I'm not talking too much about the micro entrepreneur work today, but that's a good idea for for talks. So hello, everyone. My name is Julie Hoy. I am an assistant professor at the University of Michigan School of Information. My work generally focuses on understanding how technology affects economic mobility and engagement in work, particularly among under-resourced populations. And I'm excited to present some recent research. Oh, yeah?
I'm going to interrupt you just a second, Julie. So we're seeing your presenter notes.
Oh, you're seeing the
not
other
your,
slides.
yeah. So I think you need to just swap the
How about,
screens.
is this better?
Well, right now we're not seeing anything, so you need to share
Oh,
again.
let's see. Desktop 2. Share. Do you see the notes or the presentation?
We see the notes, but can you swap?
How about now?
Yeah, this is great.
Okay,
exactly.
Interesting. I wonder why that happened. Well, thank you for letting me know. So, yep, I'm excited to present some recent research on mechanisms of control experienced by women gig workers on home service platforms. And this work was performed with our wonderful research team, including Ira and Jali Anwar, who led this project that I'll be discussing today, and Joyjeet Pal at Microsoft Research. So there's been a lot of important work recently by scholars studying the experiences of women in the gig economy, which so far has primarily occurred around home service platforms like care work and beauty work. Tikona and Matisku, who have done a lot of work in this area, found that platforms making care work more visible still exacerbate existing inequalities for workers. So even though workers might be attached to a company name like care.com, that doesn't necessarily lead to additional benefits or say like insurance and stuff like that. While Raval and Paul, who first studied beauty workers in India, found that platforms are creating new opportunities and expectations around professionalism among home service workers. So they also see this other side of when there is this official title associated with like being part of a company, there's an increased sense of professionalism personally and publicly. Our focus on control in the study was motivated by a desire to understand how platforms influence women's work experiences, particularly in location-based settings, meaning where they have to physically interact with the customer to perform some sort of service. So previous work on controlling gig work in these location-based settings, I primarily focus on male-dominated sectors like ride sharing, whereas we question how the pre-existing socio-cultural perceptions of control, particularly around women's bodies, influence platform designs and their experiences. And this is especially important in India, where women are subject to control in various forms and networks from their immediate family, the local community, the state, and formal institutions. Our question was, how do women working on home service gig work platforms identify and negotiate explicit and implicit forms of control? And in this study, we interviewed 19 women beauty workers in Bangalore, our ages around 21 to 45 years, with a range of beauty work experience, as well as platform experience. as well as different statuses of being married or having children or being single mothers, which was particularly important to the study context because it determined how much additional responsibility they had outside of work, in addition to being on the platform, which kind of controlled like when they could go to work, like their hours and such. Then we analyzed the data according to existing frameworks around mechanisms of control. So Catherine Kellogg and colleagues described three main types of algorithmic control: algorithmic recording and restricting, algorithmic recording and rating, and algorithmic rewarding and replacing. And then we also found examples of non-algorithmic examples of control from, say, trainers. So bureaucratic control, which we use Richard Edwards' framework. So just to give a quick overview of the different examples that we found of these different types of control for algorithmic recording and restricting, platforms assigned workers to tasks and customers. So in terms of like recommending where, when to work, they might suggest different times, but they would say like, these are the certain times that you would earn more. With algorithmic recording and rating, customers would rate workers on a scale, which was pretty common in these gig work platforms, and as well as platforms asking to track completion times and locations. So a worker could see their rating, but also like how many jobs that they have completed in order to meet the minimum that the company required. Rewarding and replacing, there was often leader status boards where you could see where you were compared to with the other workers, which sometimes corresponded to how much additional support you got. So if you performed a certain number of jobs and had a certain rating, you might get more tech support or like call support if you were in need at a time, which is something that wasn't exactly clear to a lot of the participants we talked to. They always wondered like, how come after a certain number of calls to support, I would get cut off? And it was tied to the number of jobs that they were performing. And then finally, there was a lot of experiences of control outside of the algorithm, just from trainers and clients during in-person work. But what was most interesting from our findings was not just like the different ways that women were experiencing control from the platform according to these existing frameworks, but how workers were negotiating control between the platform and other parts of their lives. So while we intended to mainly explore the experiences of control on the job, we found that platform control mechanisms actually significantly affected and in many ways reconfigured family and social dynamics. So for instance, one participant, she said, my family was scared. And by scared, what she meant was before working on the gig work platform, she wasn't allowed to travel freely around the city. She always had to travel with a male companion, such as her father, brother, or husband. They would drop her off at work and pick her up, so she wasn't allowed to go anywhere on her own outside of being at work and going home with someone else. But now with working on a gig work platform, she was expected to enter into different strangers' homes by herself. And so they were concerned about her safety. They said, or she said, my family was scared. So I told them, look, there's good security here. For starting job and ending, they ask for OTP, the location. Then if something happens, if there's a problem, there are people for us. And so this was interesting to see because we saw how they were using platform control and surveillance to kind of alleviate some of the control and surveillance experience at home and from their family. So they're kind of saying like, instead of just experiencing control on the job, they were saying like, oh, look at all the different ways that they're monitoring my presence. They're always asking me for my location. They ask for a selfie when I get to the job. If something goes wrong, they know exactly where I am. And they kind of use that as a way to convince their family that you don't have to watch over me now. Now, like this platform is watching me in your place. Other participants use these platform expectations to negotiate control enacted by customers in their one-on-one interactions. So one other participant said, I made him understand company policy until we talk to the woman client, we're not supposed to come take the service. I tried to make him understand, but he's still requesting me, please come, please come. And I said, no, I cannot, please cancel this thing. So if they were working as an independent beauty worker outside the platform, they wouldn't have like a clear platform-based excuse to like remove themselves from this uncomfortable and potentially dangerous situation. They felt a lot more comfortable pointing to the platform rules, extensive rules to say, this is not allowed, and therefore I have to cancel it. And then they would kind of work with the platform to deal with the ramifications of canceling a job. So both of these examples show that, unlike what we expected, which was how platform control was just compiling or superimposing on top of the existing experience of control that they had in their daily life, what we actually found was that women workers were using this platform control and surveillance mechanisms to negotiate other aspects of control in their life. So they were kind of pitting them against each other, which was interesting. However, even as beauty workers exercise agency, platform control does not structurally challenge the sociocultural logic that restricts women's lives in India. So it is important to understand a lot of the behind the scenes work that women are doing in order to access greater agency. And that's something that I want to point out in terms of why we were studying this in this way, was that it's really important to understand all like the background context in terms of like, what does control mean in these work scenarios, like to understand people's experiences. However, I just want to say that all of this work was performed pre-pandemic. So now with concerns over health and safety, when hiring in-person workers, the study team started to wonder how these platforms were leveraging these like kind of public concerns to further shape or perhaps increase the experiences of control. So we've continued to collect interview data during the pandemic. So some things we wonder is, how are these platforms leveraging these public concerns to enforce increased control and surveillance? And also, what are the additional labor women are expected to perform as a result of this increase? So just some initial things that we're seeing is that in order to make customers feel comfortable, women beauty workers have to like take their temperature before the job. And they also have to like take additional pictures showing that they are cleaning the utensils. And all of this is added on to their responsibilities without increasing the time that it is expected of the job. So they're already kind of trying to meet like, say, like a 45-minute limit of performing the service. And now they have these additional things that are packed on in order to kind of like meet the demands of the platform. Also, we wonder, how have platforms started to influence other aspects of day-to-day life outside of just work? So we see examples of platforms not just kind of being the employer, but also handing out loans according to like the situation that women are working in, perhaps like giving some sort of benefits or tying their type of work to like the loans or insurance that is being provided. And we also question, what are the ways in which platforms can alter their design to address the often invisibilized infrastructural burdens that women workers carry? So these are some questions that we're exploring right now in our current data, and we'd love to get your feedback on the direction. And if any of you are also performing work on some of these topics, we'd love to connect as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Julie. That was great. And I love that you ended with these questions. I think that this is also, in fact, a great segue into the next talk that we have from Nervo and Naveen. So if you want to share your screen. And speaking of invisible work, they will be talking about invisible maintenance work, or the invisible work of maintenance in the case of frontline health. And both Nervo and Naveen, they've been working in the space of frontline health work for quite some time, also looking at projects around maternal health, around menstrual health, and various kind of aspects of health and well-being. So with that, I will let them start their presentation.
Thank you, Neha. And thank you for the invitation and the introduction. So today we are going to give you an overview of our work for the last three years. Also, this is part of a project that was funded by the Medical Research Councils and the Arts and Humanities Research Council in the UK. So my name is Nervo. I'm a lecturer in human computer interaction at Cardiff University, and this is a collaborative work with the University of Leicester and Loughborough University. I will let Naveen to introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Naveen, and I work at Srishti Manipal Institute of Art, Design, and Technology. That's a mouthful. But also I work I'm a part of a collective called as Design Beku, and I'm located out of Bangalore. So next, please. So I mean, in India, there's a lot of digital futures being ushered or imposed based on where you see it. But one of the things that is emerging is what is this digital, future of digitally enabled health, and this is a article by Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, who is one of the leading biotech entrepreneur in India. And they talk about how ASHA workers can become digital health agents in the future, So what is interesting is they imagine digital ASHA workers, and ASHA workers, I'll come to about who are these ASHA workers, but they're one of the frontline health workers in India. And they imagine the ASHA workers as digital health agents that can enable teleconsultants between specialists and individuals. And this is an important point, and I want us to focus on this, and we'll come back to it. Acting as an important digital link between primary and tertiary care in rural areas. And that's their imagination. And they think that that's going to happen through digital technology. Next, please. But to look at what is happening actually in the current work practices and lives of ASHA workers. This is an image. They all wear a sort of a rose pink sari as their work uniform. And this is an image of a protest that happened in the mid-pandemic in Bangalore of them, ASHA workers protesting all over India, but this is from Bangalore because of their incentives not being paid and them being considered as gig workers by the government. So next, please. But also the pandemic has brought forward how a lot of the public health infrastructure in India and at the community level is held together by frontline health workers, who ASHA workers are one of the three kind of frontline health workers. And the pandemic has really brought forward the way that ASHA workers are actually holding together the infrastructure and making it work in so many different ways. So what we are trying to talk about today is we want to share our research about how the work happens by frontline health workers. How do they work, and what kind of work they do, and what parts of it is invisible to the policymakers, to designers, and to the governments. And when especially it becomes important when we're talking about future of healthcare work. Nervo?
So as Naveen was saying, the pandemic has made actually visible all the work that frontline health workers do. So now at the conceptual level, we just went back and trying to see how we can understand infrastructures, right? Because often infrastructure is considered something that is physical there, that people can actually use, is a basic service. But if we can see the definition by Starr and Rottler, it actually defines infrastructure as something that is merged in practice, right? It's connecting different activities and different elements of different structures. So we try to take this definition and try to explore the healthcare infrastructure as a highly relational level or social level. And if we can see the definition between healthcare infrastructure, basically is all the physical, social, spatial, all the material arrangements that we can find in situ among people, routines, artifacts, places, even technologies, and how they are, and what are the different configurations and arrangements that they take place in order to support the healthcare infrastructure. So in CSCW and ACI research in healthcare, there have been a lot of work in human and information infrastructures in healthcare, but mostly in the hospital. But there have been also starting some more little work around how we can understand care infrastructures outside the clinical settings, right? It could be in the home, it could be in the municipality care settings, or it could be even in community health, right? So as the motivation at the beginning, Naveen was talking, so one of the main actors here is the community health workers, or the frontline health workers, right? One of the main parts of the human infrastructure supporting community health across many different countries, right? It could be community health workers or volunteers or any sort of community social services, right? They deliver a lot of different activities like doing counseling, health education, support the early identification of different sort of diseases or patients according to their own programs. There have been also a lot in digital health, a lot of technologies, mobile technology, web applications. There are videos also trying to support the role that community health workers do. Like, for example, educating the community or being the intermediaries of information, right? But there is less work about the understanding the invisible work in community health, as we can see the work of Neha. And there have been many different ways to understand the work they do, but usually most of the people have considered only as a data collectors, right? So we try to understand the invisible work in community health of frontline health workers, trying to use the concept of maintenance. If we can see the definition is the mundane labor that goes into sustaining, functioning the efficient infrastructures. So using this definition, we define the work of maintenance in community health as a type of articulation work that exists and happens that is more visible in order to sustain different community health infrastructures. So we then started a project with Naveen, trying to understand care infrastructures and the role of all these different many physical and digital and human elements, right? So in South India, we started a case study or a project in Chenapatna town, that you can see on the left, in the bottom left. Basically, we started studying the urban and rural areas of Chenapatna, who is located in the Ramanagara district that belongs to the Karnataka state. We try to engage with different types of community health workers and community households in order to understand how these different elements exist, how frontline health workers and also the community navigate across all these different elements that can be actually distributed across the healthcare infrastructure. We have just played the video just to give you an overview of the different studies. We conducted different interviews at the household level with different pregnant women, and the caregivers are also nursing mothers. We also have different types of focus groups in order to engage with the community support workers, right? We actually visited the community, the rural and semi-urban areas, and also visit the Taluka District Hospital in order to understand how the different frontline health workers actually interact with the community. I'm not going to show the whole video because of the time, but then Naveen can continue with the findings.
Thank you, Nervo. So we did this project in collaboration with Maya, which is a not-for-profit based out of Bangalore, but they train women health workers and support them into collectives. So we are kind of working with them. So this is just an example to articulate who are these frontline health workers that we worked with and that we researched with. So this is a drawing and work done by Anushree, who was my student, who also did their master's project as part of this work. So it's their drawing and there's the map. We'll not go into much of this work in the map right now, but what is important to note is we looked at three kinds of frontline health workers. One is a junior health assistant who works at the primary health center or the tertiary or the Taluk Health Center, which is the community level health center. And then there's an Anganwadi worker who is at the local sort of linked to the Ministry of Human Resource. And then there's an ASHA worker who is a volunteer worker that is linked, that works with the primary health center. So both the JHA and the ASHA worker are linked to Ministry of Health. So they belong to two different ministries, but on the ground, it's the coordination between those three that actually enable successful delivery of healthcare services for the communities. Next, please. So this work, actually, what we're going to talk about is from the paper that is forthcoming in CSCW 21, and we did focus groups and participatory action, sort of research with the frontline health workers, and we framed the findings from the lens of maintenance work and work that becomes invisible, and we articulate three kinds of maintenance work broadly. One is work that goes into making the care infrastructure work and different aspects of the care infrastructure work through different practices. The second is maintaining relationships amongst themselves, but also relationships with the community. And the third is work that goes into maintaining themselves. And we are not going to go in depth, and hopefully we'll be able to release the paper soon. But we're going to articulate some of it through structuring it with the story of Kamala. Kamala is a high-risk pregnant women that we encountered and engaged with in the first part of the project, and they Kamala both anemic and has gestational diabetes. So this is a journey, or pregnancy journey, or highlights of it rather, that was captured by us, and then that Swati drove. Swati was the research assistant, and we're going to just highlight how across this journey, what happens in the background for the frontline health workers to work, so that this journey becomes a bit more bearable. So next, please. So one of the challenges or the work that frontline health workers do is data entry, and that's quite well known, commonly known. But how does this data entry happen and why? So when a pregnant woman is, when the pregnancy is detected, the data enters into what is known as an MCTS portal, which is Mother and Child Tracking System, and this data entry is supposed to be done by a data entry personnel who is at a nodal center in the Taluk Health Center. But most often they are overloaded, and the JHA has to go on and they have to take out time to enter the data. But it's not so simple, because the forms are in English and the data that is collected and the conversation is in Kannada. So there's a lot of translation work that happened, as is captured by this quote. Next, please. What is also interesting is that once the data is entered for the first time, the pregnant women get what is known as a Thai card. Thai in Kannada is mother. So all states have different cards. And this is a physical leaflet which has a unique number that is associated with the phone number of the pregnant women. Usually it's a phone number of their husband, as far as what we have found out. And the Thai card acts as three different roles. One is it has information for the pregnant women of how to breastfeed, how to take care, what food to eat, visual infographics. The second is it has coupons linked to that number, unique number, for them to avail benefits from the state. And the third is that it facilitates data entry, physical data entry into the system for the frontline health workers. But these Thai cards do get lost. So the way, but still the frontline health workers repair it and mend it by using whiteners and reusing older Thai cards, so that they continue to capture data and feed it to the system, though the pregnant women will not be able to access and avail the benefits of it. Next, please. But it's not just the pregnancy care work that the frontline health workers do. The ASHA workers and the Anganwadi workers are told to do a lot of work, especially data collection work, increasingly about surveys about dengue. Now with COVID, they've been actively involved in contact tracing. This was pre-COVID, 2018-19. So their need to, so their mentality is that, or the way that they practice is that all activities of household visits, they're ready to reconfigure it as a potential opportunity to do other related care activities. So this quote, I'm just going to read it. First, the ASHA workers go for household visits and see if there are any pregnant ladies. And these household visits could be for any reason, doing a mosquito larva survey for dengue, for example. And then they locate the pregnant ladies and tell them to apply for the Thai card. When we do this, we also tell them to do a UPT, urine pregnancy test, by offering the test kits that they have to carry. They usually carry some, because you never know, And then if they're willing, we do the test at home with it. If not, we take them to the PHC and get it done. Next, please. What is important is that taking them to the PHC is the primary health center. So there's a lot of commuting or the travel that the pregnant woman does within the local or the community health infrastructure. There's a primary health center, and then for various reasons they have to also visit the taluk health center, and then if they are high risk pregnancy, then they have to visit the district health center or the tertiary hospital. And a lot of these visits are being accompanied by ASHA worker. And the ASHA worker is not just the visit accompanying, but it also that means that they have to they mend the gaps in this infrastructure, so that the journey, literal and also emotional, of the pregnant women becomes a bit more smoother. So this one case, I'm just going to read it. There was one case where I had taken a woman for delivery. It was a C-section case at the Chenpatna Hospital, which is a taluk health center. That day, however, the sister, who's JHA, was not there. Otherwise, probably she could have managed things. The pregnant woman's body blood pressure had gone high, because of which we had to go to Mandya. Now, Mandya is about 40 kilometers away from Chenpatna, and Chenpatna's, which is where there is one of the district tertiary hospital. But Chenpatna also, there's a closer tertiary hospital, which is 15 kilometers away in Ramnagara. But all the doctors and the pregnant women prefer to go to Mandya because of its better facilities. So they have to travel 40 kilometers. We had to go to Mandya. We had to stay in Mandya for 3 days. I couldn't locate the sister at that time, and the high blood pressure of the pregnant woman was difficult to manage. So ASHA worker had to go with a pregnant woman and stay for 3 days. And that brings into a lot of focus on a lot of interpersonal relationships that they have to maintain amongst themselves, but also among community, expectations from the community. But what we'll highlight in the next slide is that there's a lot of work that goes into maintaining themselves. And one of the biggest amount of work that they do is to track their incentives, because they're paid according to the services rendered. And that's why I think that it is the platform, so to speak, is rife for them to gigify ASHA workers. So I'm just going to read this quote. They say, we accompany the women to the taluk health center for any procedure in the morning. And we get 50 rupees if we do everything for the patient and send them in the auto rickshaw back to their homes. Once I send them back, and then we go and get it, which is the details of the procedure entered in the data center. Once they do it, we get 50 rupees, which is their incentives for that particular task. And we spend almost 60 rupees to come and go from our homes sometimes through the auto rickshaws. And so in many ways, there's a loss of money. And to claim the auto rickshaw, they have to produce invoice. And in India, no auto rickshaw driver would produce invoice. And it adds on to more work. But what is also important is that because of lack of incentives and all the work that goes into tracking incentives, ASHA workers have left job, which has put pressure on the Anganwadi workers and on the JHAs. So they say they have left the job. Not even a rupee had come in the first year of her service. So they didn't earn money for an entire year despite all the work. So that's just one of the examples. So that brings us to just a glimpse of all the work that our paper, we describe it in more detail. But what we argue in the end of the paper is what we see is that there is a possibility and an opportunity for design of technology and design of systems to bring the maintenance work at the center of design. So can we think of maintenance center design, and as well as look at maintenance as a work of system building, because they have to put together actively systems so that systems that work for their community. Nervo?
Yeah, so trying to move into maintenance center design, in the paper we describe different design opportunities to do that. Like in relation to the previous talk, trying to make a maintenance practice visible, but trying to pay attention to the negotiation of visibility in this case, right? So it has to be visible enough just for legitimation of this particular work. Because we can see in the paper, there are many different cases and conflicts between the different kinds of frontline health workers. Technology can also support to help them reconcile their work and trying to support each other, because there are different types of frontline health workers where sometimes there could be more that it can be done by the technology in order to support not only the the coordination of work practices, but also how they can negotiate, how they can actually support the work of each other. So later if we can see in the questions, so just because of the time. So we want to take all the co-authors of this paper, the research assistants, Saya and Swati, and all our collaborators in the UK. And also in particular, we want to thank Maya and all the community health workers that support this work. Is there any question? We can take it later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nervo. Thank you, Naveen, for the presentation. We will do questions in a bit. I think we're running a little bit behind, but Carlos, thank you for sharing your side. So Carlos is doing his PhD in the space of crowd work, so looking at the future of crowd work, and this is, I guess, exactly what I was going to say. So using AI tools in this context. And so with that, Carlos, please.
Okay, thank you so much for the introduction and for having me with such talented people presenting cases from different parts of the world. So yeah, I'm Carlos Toxtli, PhD candidate at West Virginia University, and today I'm going to present part of the work that we have been doing here in the Human-Computer Interaction Lab, directed by Dr. Said Savash. The topic today is empowering workers using artificial intelligence tools, and we are going to speak briefly about what we have been doing about this topic in crowd work. So yeah, of course, research has shown that workers and digital labor platforms are working on their unfair conditions. What do I mean with unfair conditions? So some of them earn less than the minimum wage, and some of them really spend a lot of time working in the platforms, and it didn't compensate the amount of money they earn. Some of their work is rejected, and there are many unfair conditions that they face. I'm citing a paper. Well, it's a book that it's called Ghost Work from Mary Gray and Sid Serling, which it explains a little bit about different challenges the crowd workers face. So crowd workers are the ones that empower the AI. So they do these micro tasks like labeling images, like labeling text, and many other tasks that empower the AI systems that we use nowadays. So, well, in my research, I'll focus on studying new AI interfaces and tools for transforming and improving the workers' conditions. So I'm focused mainly in the three main areas in which we have been exploring. One is getting fairer and frictionless interaction between workers and employers. So how we smooth the interaction between them. Then it's empowering workers to develop their skills and earn higher wage. So basically, yeah, how can we make their skills counting, an upskilling task. Then empowering workers to be creative and entrepreneurs. So giving them more opportunities than only working in a platform with routine tasks. So in the first one, I'm going to talk about fairness and friction avoidance at work. So in this paper is called Reputation Agent. We wanted to safeguard the reputation. Why? Because the reputation of the workers is really important. If they have a low rating in their reputation, it can limit the tasks they can get. So basically, they can earn less money if they have a bad reputation. So in order to prevent that, in order to safeguard that, I developed an AI that was able to detect these unfair reviews. Just to give you an example, for instance, an Uber driver that gets a bad review because of the traffic. Of course, that is unfair. It's not his or her fault. Another example is a Grubhub delivery man or woman who is for instance, if there is an ingredient missing in the food, of course, it's not his or her fault. So we detected many cases that were against the policies and the ones that were related to the policies in order to train the AI to detect the fair and unfair reviews. So basically there we got some results. For instance, we had an Uber scenario, Grubhub scenario, and Upwork scenario, in which it's a task, it's a task market, and we detected that exposing the requesters to an interface that validates their review before sending it really helped to decrease the number of unfair reviews. So yeah, the AI can help to reduce, of course, to prompt requesters just to revise their review. And of course, if they want to predict their reviews, it's okay. We only like alert from the requesters that it may be against the policies or the guidelines of the platform. Another example is how can we empower teams using these AI tools? So we know that this effective project management usually relies in different tools, right? Like this project management tools in which we track the tasks there, we log them, and we continue tracking the tasks there. And some of them requires like a hierarchical structure. So there is a manager that is logging the task and is tracking the task. But what about if the AI can do that work? So can be the middleman that is tracking the task and asking for updates to everybody. So basically, we developed a task bot. Basically, a bot that's in a communication channel. It could be the email or a chat. So basically, everybody can ask tasks to any other member on the team, no matter if it is a hierarchical or non-hierarchical team. So what we observed there is that it really reduced the social friction between the team members. So yeah, most of the subordinates felt like free of asking tasks to their managers because it was easier, right? Because you really do it mediated by the chatbot. And well, we saw different interaction between the hierarchical and non-hierarchical teams, so it reduces a lot the social friction between them. So you didn't well, in that time you didn't need to ask directly to the other person and to ask and ask and ask again about the status of each task. And also the user realized that it was an effective way of self-sourcing. So basically ask the bot to remind their tasks and to track their tasks. Well, in these different types of categories that we have studied, the other is how we can help in the worker skill development. So we developed this tool that it's called Support Worker. So in order to share the knowledge that workers have. So basically an expert worker, often they earn more money because they know some strategies to earn more money, to find the best tasks that take less time and you can earn more money, right? So basically we developed this AI that learn from effective experienced worker strategies and then share to novice workers. So basically the novice workers were implementing, executing these strategies and improving their wages. So what we saw was that the workers that use this crowd coach, this AI, were able to increase their wages because they followed these strategies. Why is this important? Because when we enter into a normal job, we often got this training in which we can jumpstart into the work. But in online platforms, you don't have that training, you don't have that onboarding. So basically, of course, you can learn how to use the platform, but how do you learn how to make a living in that platform? So this is why we developed that. And well, we showed that it can work if it is implemented in other platforms. Well, then another use case that we have is math. It's basically how we scale experts into the crowd market. So yeah, recruiting experts, it's difficult. Why? Because they have a limited time, they are scarce. And of course, if you ask for some feedback, some evaluation, it will take time to get a response from them. So math it's a workflow. It's a bot. It's not, well, it's a chat bot and a bot that basically completes the workflow. It recruits experts from LinkedIn. It asks them to join the platform and to take some micro tasks. So to give some micro feedback to novice learners, so they can get feedback from their work. So we implemented in some design activities. So basically there were designers that gave some feedback, and we also involved from other activities. So what do I mean with micro feedback? Instead of asking, hey, what do you think about this design? We ask, what about the color? Or what about the distribution of the elements? So just one element that was very easy just to reply and to give feedback. This is what we meant by microfeedback. So part of the result we have is, for instance, from entrepreneurship. So some entrepreneurs gave feedback from design tasks, from programming tasks. We implemented tools. So basically novices submit their work and got micro feedback, and basically they were retained in the platform. They were more time and executed more tasks in the learning platform in which they were involved. Another aspect that we want to present is how these AI tools can help in terms of creativity and entrepreneurship at work. So, or entrepreneurship. So in this case, we developed this bot that it's called Expert Twin. This is not a chatbot. This is a crawler. It's a bot. And basically, it lives in the workplace. When you are working in a document and you write a sentence or a paragraph, it goes to the internet and it gets a related site for that paragraph, and it provided to you in the form of a list or of a visualization. So I think for researchers, this is very convenient because as you are typing, you are getting sites that are relevant and some work that is relevant, and also for news writers and basically for all the knowledge type of work. If some of our results were exploring different types of visualization in which the workers wanted to be alerted about some content that was related or can complement their work or can help them to improve their story. So basically, we tested this graphs in which we linked each of the contents in 3D and 2D and also in VR. And they love the VR because they could navigate across time. So the deeper, the oldest the content. So yeah, we were like evaluating different visualization, and that it really helped them to improve their work and to create to more ideas. Lastly, we explored in the entrepreneur side. So what if we give a platform to everybody, to anyone, to create a marketplace like an Uber for X? So imagine you want someone to walk your dog, and there are people that can walk your dog. So basically, you can connect both parts in a platform like Uber. So basically, I developed a platform that was literally an Uber-like app. So basically, so the people can just configure the app and start a marketplace from there. So basically, we started doing some testing with crowd workers just to see if they propose some marketplaces that were more were fairer, or marketplaces where they expose similar ideas. But we found that they provide multiple type of ideas of this community applications. So basically, we detected that workers from different type of jobs were required. So we were expecting more professionals only, but even agricultures and many other type of work emerged. So we can see if we open the opportunity to anyone to create a platform, the diversity in the jobs will increase a lot. So and we were also surprised that many of them ensured that the workers receive a minimum wage. So some takeaways. Currently, the workers who empower the AI, they require guidance. Of course, some tools that help them to make a living, and of course, to safeguard their reputation. AI tools not only empower individuals workplace, but also team collaboration, as we saw. So we can reduce social friction and improve the management work in teams. New collaboration models will enable a diverse labor offer while ensuring a minimum wage. So basically, that's we saw some of the proposals of platforms were basically ensuring at least a minimum wage. So some reflections, improving the work condition implies a joint effort. It's not only the effort of the owner of the platform, but also the requesters to be aware of their feedback they are giving, and also the workers to give quality work. Requires recognition to validate their current skills. They are working for hours and they cannot prove their skills in the job market. And well, the platforms that enable the marketplaces should ensure that fair working conditions are granted for workers. And so this is what we have been working on. So thank you very much. Those are my contact information. And I'm happy to get questions.
Thank you so much, Carlos. Thank you, everybody, for all of your talks. Okay, great. We turned out screen sharing. So at this point, I guess if you have a question, you can raise your hand maybe, and we can unmute you. Is that, well, that's one option. The other is we already have some questions in the chat, so that might be the place to start. So actually, Pranjal, do you want to just ask your question out loud, and then we can hear from Naveen and Nervo?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I think Naveen has already answered, but yes. So my curiosity goes in, yes. So what is the incentive for the policymakers to keep the maintenance at the center to improve the health services? Yes, it will increase or give visibility to the invisible work which the health workers are currently doing. But would that be sufficient for policymakers to even consider this thing in the policy?
Actually, yeah, this is a great question, Pranjal, because but for me the answer is simple. Is at least in India, health is a public good, which means that it is for the public, and it has to be hopefully be free, and but also if not at least affordable and accessible, and the best that the country can offer. So and our work, and but there are also a lot of other work has established that how the frontline health workers are actually the people and who build this infrastructure, who make this work for the communities. And if the policymakers' intention is to make this, they have to make the system better in order to achieve the goal of giving free, if not free, affordable, accessible healthcare for the public at large, right? And that is the only incentive they would need, ideally. And that's yeah. Nervo, you want to answer this?
Yeah, I was answering in the chat because the question is not only relevant, but it's also important not only in India, but across many different healthcare infrastructures in many different countries, and not necessarily only in the global south, because in the UK we also have many different problems. But for example, one example is we found a lot of duplication of work done by the many different types of frontline health workers. So you want to convince the government and the policymakers, like, why do they have to do the same work all over again? It's better actually to support them, not only to do their work, which is sort of invisible, but also trying to think, because we also uncover a lot of emotional work that they do and how they handle and how they negotiate between themselves, with their families, and also with the community. So if we can actually support them and increase their well-being, they actually will be more happy, they will be more able to actually go do their visits and trying to support the community, right? So they do a lot of workarounds, and they do develop different strategies to try to, because they have their own motivation, right? But it will be better if the policymakers actually recognize this work as work, not only as something that they do because they like it, and support them, because that will actually increase the efficiency, and maybe they will reach more communities. But yeah, it's quite difficult questions, not only for the India context, but also across the world.
To add on to just one point, that conversation itself. So I have read a couple of other articles. So nursing is another profession where care is more important. It goes more than directly caring with a direct relationship with the patient. So yes, this problem is still there, and acknowledging the care as work is difficult. But still, why isn't the compensation is increasing? It has been an issue for more than decades. Um, how that is stopping the policymakers to think about when there are a lot of things coming up. But yeah, this we could think about later as well.
Okay, let's hear from Savita.
Yeah, fascinating. Thanks so much, Neha, for organizing this, because it's been a fantastic couple of hours. I loved, Nick, your research on time. Everyone's research has been interesting. Julie, I just had a quick question on the negotiation of norms. We're just kicking off a project on gender and platform gig workers. So I wanted to ask you a little bit more about that negotiation where, what I understood was a woman may say, you don't have to worry about me because the platform's watching out for me. Is there any kind of have you done any research on whether the males in the family ask for that kind of evidence, or how women negotiate that relationship and so on? I'd just love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so far the people that we've talked to, they haven't had to kind of produce a lot of the evidence to their family members regularly. I think it's the fact that it exists maybe is like enough to get them started on the job. And they said that once they started earning and being able to provide for the family a lot more, the like, I guess, control from family let off a little bit. So it's kind of the combination of there's that surveillance from the platform, and also now that they're earning, that they start to trust their independence a bit more.
Okay, just the fact that it's there.
Yeah, I think it's like the fact that they have to like report their OTP and like take pictures of themselves at multiple stages of the job, that I guess it makes it seems like protection.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks, Neha.
Questions? I saw Naveen's answer here, by the way, Pranjal, just in case you haven't seen it. And Akhil, you were saying something.
Yeah, I also have a question for Julie. So it's more like a comment and sort of sharing an anecdote recently that I heard. So there is a company that I know in India, a startup which runs sort of decentralized call centers where they recruit people in the country to attend to like calls from customers. And because of various socioeconomic reasons, a lot of these call center employees are actually women. And again, during the pandemic, I think their business really boomed because people could work from home. But recently I was talking, and they mentioned that the customers are complaining about poor user experience. And the reasoning is that when they're talking to these call center employees, their kids are at home, maybe there is some noise in the background. And now they are trying to deploy some AI-based solutions to sort of de-incentivize women who have kids in the background, let's say. So if a kid is making a noise in the background, then they would probably not route the call to that particular woman. So I guess the question is, if we take these sort of classic HCI metrics like user experience, then we can potentially end up, imposing more control on the gig workers in a way, right? We are not only imposing controls on themselves, but also on their family and social life in a way. So what are your thoughts on that, maybe?
Yeah, I think that's why it's so complicated, because it's like the platforms are just kind of imposing control based on whatever makes them more money. And it's the experience from the workers, it kind of just depends on the situation. So like we were expecting that the control that their experience was just like, when I went into the project, it's like more control is bad. And it was just more nuanced than that. But I can see what you're talking about, where this additional control, where it's limiting women with children from being able to work. That is definitely a negative example of that happening.
And
Yeah.
maybe a related question for Carlos on this front. So I think like you gave some good examples of how AI can be used to improve the reliability or like reduce this negative reviews. But in this case, for example, AI is used to somehow de-incentivize the workers, right? Sort of discriminate against them. So do you have any thoughts on like sort of the negative sides of AI in this future of work context?
Yeah, definitely. There are a lot of things to take care about when we expose these technologies and we just let them automatically run it. Of course, sometimes some some moderation is required just to get some sense from humans. And this is why there are some pipelines in which humans can be involved, some human in the loop, to at the beginning just try to mitigate that. But yeah, I think it's an incremental implementation.
Thank you both of you.
Any questions? So I saw that Divyanshu had a question. I was going to loop back to that, but Naveen, you already answered. The thing that you said about compensation, I was wondering, like, that's probably something that cuts across many of the research talks that we heard today, and how compensation is decided, how it isn't ever high enough. It doesn't seem fair. And in the case of like gig workers, there might be different reasons for it. In the case of health workers, there could be different reasons. Is it purely a supply and demand issue, or is there more to it? This is speaking to the question you brought up, Naveen. Actually, I should direct it to somebody. Like, it's not. So what you said about value, right? Is it? How does value play into this kind of supply-demand equation? This was directed at Naveen.
Okay, so what I mean is I would go back to the first quote of Kiran Shaw that that we shared, but how they look at they say that only when we look at them as digital health agents, they'll be able to connect the primary and the tertiary health services in India. But what they miss is they're already doing it. Our research, your research, so there's so much of research that shows that the health workers are already connecting the primary and tertiary in so many ways. So what is this imagination that kind of devalues the work that is happening, that we broadly categorize as maintenance work? And why is that being devalued by this imagination that some tech platform will solve it, right? And sorry, there's a plane flying. We'll mute. See it in the video. Okay, so I don't have an answer for that, except that the fact that at least from an Indian perspective, what is happening is there is an increasing privatization of healthcare, which moved from tertiary care to is moving into primary healthcare, and the devaluing of labors is coming from that perspective, and you can see, and that's why I keep saying that ASHA worker system is geared up, is rife to become converted into a gig platform, because the platforms too, and I think this is something, at least what I saw today, is that the platform is also, those platforms do devalue the work and the labors that goes into by the gig workers. So maybe there's some sort of a commonality of how do people who imagine and design these such platforms, or even at the policy level, what kind of value they to attach the work done by the gig workers or the frontline workers.
Thank you. Questions? So if there isn't one for Nick, I would like to ask about time, right? So again, thank you for kind of the broad and rich understanding that you gave about just how people think about time. Maybe not looking at the space of gig workers, but I'm also wondering, just, us, like, we're working across time zones all the time, but we have a very different understanding, possibly in different regions around time. How do you see that play out in like the COVID scenario? Just like anything that comes to mind that you see like parallels with your work.
So I think one thing that's been quite interesting during the pandemic is this opportunity for people who wouldn't usually get to talk to each other or be part of platforms and go to talks and things. I've been to so many more talks in the past year because everybody's in any one country is at home, so things are being opened up. So there is the opportunity for that. And then, because people become aware, such as this platform or some conferences that I've been to, where they've been to, a morning version and an evening version to enable people across the time zones to all have some kind of synchronous experience, that has forced people a little bit to think about it in a way that they didn't before COVID. So I think there's that. But I think there's also an opposite, so there's an interesting scale effect, I think, for people, privileged people like ourselves. So on the one hand, we have a bit of possibly an increased understanding about how being synchronous in some way is very important to our relationships and understandings of each other's world. But at the same time, in our daily lives, we are now sort of cut off from these rhythms of work and commuting and seeing people on their way and back from work and stuff. So we sort of start coming into this kind of bubble time. So that's the privileged people, the people who do have international connections and have and they're not gig workers on international connections, they are privileged academics. Then you've got, but although a lot of them would say, hang on, but I've lost all control of my work-home life balance now. My kid, the thing you mentioned about, kids in the background, so many academics or professionals are having to deal with that issue. So there's that other tension. But I think when we think about people who are really not privileged, that their lives often are continuing to a certain degree as normal. They still have to go and do all of this work out on the streets. They are in the front line, whatever it is that they're doing. So I think that maybe our rhythmicity might be fragmenting more in our local societies and grouping us together more in these bands of privilege things. That would be my sort of hunches about things. I haven't really given it a great deal of thought. What do other people think?
Okay, so Naveen has some I think feedback or question for you, Nick, and in the but does anyone want to kind of speak to the time? Yeah.
Sorry, it's actually a question that is more inspired by Nick, but I guess for all of us. I'm sorry, I forgot to put the question mark at the end. but I think a great talk, because I really enjoyed the focus on time, and what I realized through your talk is that the measure of time that is used to measure a lot of delivery sort of gig work is rooted in the notion of efficiency. But what is surprising for me that I realize is we're ordering pizzas. Why is delivery of in a specific time at the risk, at least in India, at the risk of them being caught by breaking traffic rules and whatnot? and making that so important for pizza, and where that comes from is just fascinating. I don't know if you have some answers to that, but
yeah. So the computational impulse for efficiency is something that's very deep in computation's entire ontology. Everything. It's a key measure for much of the data sciences, for whether that's efficiency with power, with whatever it is. It's all about this sort of like coming from this. And then of course you've got the sort of Taylorism of what can you squeeze out of your workers for your resource. So those two things have come together. And I think, you know, in that kind of thinking that I've done, it comes up in a lot of the AI literature from the social sciences now about, you know, why do you guys in computing all love efficiency so much? And it comes back to the way we're taught to measure and determine what is valuable. It's a very high value. And then we turn it on the human being and we think, hang on, right? Is that what we're all about in life? Being efficient? Is that the sum total of our interactions? And I'd like to thanks so much for asking this, because you can see that I'm quite excited about it. But the Carlos, because I thought you had a slide at the beginning, and it was about the feedback, and I think this relates all together. The feedback. When the platform workers are getting poor feedback and it's affecting their reputation badly, and then this agent that's going to say, hang on, you know, there was bad traffic that day. The answer really is, it's the algorithm that geared the customer to expect it at a certain time that's wrong, not the traffic, right? Mm-hmm. It's the fact that our platform's going to say, oh, you know, sorry, we miscalculated, there would be, but whatever. Are they really going to do that? If they were going to do that, then I could imagine that this could be a kind of creative, reflective process where the customer starts thinking about the human and the space and the time that they are having to deal with. But I find it really hard to imagine that Uber's going to go, got our algorithm wrong with the traffic. What do you think, Carlos?
Well, yeah, you really touched a very interesting point, because we observed from this experiment that many of the prompts that we gave to requesters, they said, I'm right. I'm just saying what I'm thinking, and I don't really plan to change my feedback, because of course I arrived late and I lose an opportunity, and that was bad for me. So it doesn't matter if the driver of the platform has the fault. So I think it's more the work of this incentivize, well, to make people aware of what things you have to consider for the future. But yeah, of course, getting the platform, getting the responsibility for this type of things, they will say, my algorithms work efficiently, I earn money, and there is not much to do. But I think by starting creating awareness and making the people know what are the really policies, meaning what the work really have the responsibility for, and maybe just informing people is the first step.
So I don't know, Nick, if you wanted to say anything in response, but we are over time. I wanted to actually maybe raise this question now and maybe say that we're going to cover this in the next session that we have. So this thing about efficiency, when we're thinking about economic growth, economic production, and just the use of resources, maybe it is a good thing to think about efficiency when we're thinking about using less. And one of the kind of tussles that we have that has been surfacing for a while now around issues of economic development and sustainability is really like, on the one hand, we want to see growth, right? And on the other, we're struggling with just resources that we're running out of, particularly in parts of the global south, but just worldwide. And so that's one of the debates that we'll be talking quite a bit about in the next session, which is exactly a month from today, so on the 23rd of March, where the focus will be on sustainability and the global south. I think that there are still some questions, unfortunately, that we didn't get to. Sorry about that. We're 5 minutes late and we want to respect everyone's time. So we're going to conclude here, but feel free to reach out to the speakers outside of the session if you want copies of their papers or what have you. So thank you so much and see you in a month.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.